everyone. Welcome to another quick video commentary on the book of Genesis. And today we gonna be looking at Genesis chapter 5. We gonna be doing a full chapter recitation with some brief comments here and there. So let's go ahead and jump into it. That's chapters 1 and 2. And then creation is finished on day 6, and then the 7th day is a day of rest. So, all told, we have about 3 and 8 days between the creation of Adam and the creation of Cain and Abel. And then from there, we have Seth born, and then from Seth, we have Enoch. Okay. So Genesis chapter 5 begins with another genealogy. This time from Adam to Noah. And then we see that Seth lived 912 years and then died. This is how all the people in this chapter die. It just says they lived so and so many years and then they died. Now, the Hebrew here is a little bit obscure, but most scholars agree that it doesn't mean Enoch was taken up into heaven while he was still alive. Rather, it means that he died and then his body was taken, meaning God took him, or perhaps he was taken away by God. Let me go ahead and quickly read it, and then we can discuss some things. He was 330 years old when he begat Seth, his third son, whose name means appointed, because he was appointed to replace Abel, who was murdered by their brother Cain. Seth begat Enoch, and Enoch begat Kenan, and Kenan begat Mahalalel, and Mahalalel begat Jared, and Jared begat Enoch, who was translated without seeing death. And he begat Methuselah, who was the oldest person who ever lived, and Methuselah begat Lamech, and Lamech begat Noah. And these are the generations of men. Either way, the meaning is that he did not see death like the others. It really helps me out. And also, if you want to keep watching, I'll put a video up on your screen right now that will help you better understand the Nephilim. So, thanks so much for watching. Love you guys. See you next time. There's no account of how they died, but they all lived to be extremely old. Now, we looked at the first one in the last video. So, I'm not gonna take nearly as long on this one. He is the oldest person in scripture and the third oldest person in history. If you watch my videos on the Nephilim, then you probably already know the other two. I've talked about them there. And if you recall from our study of Genesis chapter 6, it says that Noah was a righteous man in a generation full of wicked men. And so, to have this righteous lineage going back to Adam, and then having this break in the line of death, it shows that something miraculous happened. And some scholars believe that it has to do with the fact that Enoch was a preacher of righteousness, and he warned people about the coming judgment of God, which is probably why they called him the seventh from Adam. Some believe it's because he was the seventh in the line from Adam. Others think that it's because he preached to 7 generations or 7 groups of people. Either way, he is a great example of someone who walked with God, and he was like the people of his day. And this is highlighted in the fact that he did not experience death. Instead, he was taken. But I do want to point out that these 2 genealogical tables are very important. But when we read the table in chapter 4, it stops at Enoch. And then chapter 6 goes into the corruption of man, the Nephilim, the flood, and then the genealogy from Shem to Terah, Abraham's father. In fact, he had 6 more sons after Seth. And then daughters as well. And what we see here is that the author of Genesis just chose to focus on Seth, because through him would come the Messiah. And so, we don't need to know all the other names in this genealogy, but we should note a couple things. So, when we look at chapter 5, we see that we have a pretty standard genealogy. It's similar to the ones we'll see later on in Genesis, and it's a record of the offspring of Adam, starting with his son Seth. So, what happened? What happened to all the generations between Enoch and Noah? Well, I believe they're lost. I believe that maybe a Nephilim were involved, maybe the line of Seth was wiped out, or at least heavily impacted by the events that took place in Genesis chapter 6. They help us understand the timeline of Genesis. So, Adam is created in the garden, and then the earth is without form and void for about 2 full chapters. And it's interesting because when we get to Genesis chapter 5, the author of Genesis says that this is the book of the generations of Adam. So, chapter 5, as I said, gives us the genealogy from Adam to Noah. Now, remember, Adam had 2 wives, and he had children with both of them. First of all, the name Seth means appointed, and he's called this in reference to being appointed or chosen to replace Abel, who was killed by Cain. The longest-lived person in this chapter was Methuselah, who was 187 years old when the flood came. Anyway, moving down the list, we see Enoch, and it says that he walked with God and then he was not, for God took him. And this is significant because Enoch is the grandfather of Noah. Okay, so that's all I want to say about this genealogy. Adam, the first man, who was created in God's own image, yet he rebelled against his creator and brought sin into the world. Okay, so we're about to start reading the creation account in Genesis chapter 6, and I just want to encourage you to subscribe.